Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12. I know, crazy, right? Now, I promised a little bit of teaching in this episode, but it's going to be less city planning teaching just because I couldn't fit the subject of what I wanted to talk about today, which is libraries, because that's what I'm building right now. Public library, New York Public Library, but obviously my version of it. I made a few changes that I like. We'll talk more about that later, but I wanted to teach something about it because I liked doing the teachy kind of episodes. So I decided, why not talk about the history of libraries? Believe it or not, that's not something I knew before this episode. I had to do some research. It was kind of interesting. Watched a couple videos and read some articles. Very interesting. I didn't know a lot of the history of libraries, and it's not actually that complicated. I mean, it's not like it's a done case, like this is why libraries exist in your town kind of a thing, but there are some definitive people and moments in time that kind of led to the library culture that we have today. Namely, starting first with this man. Now, hopefully, if you're an American, you know who this is. This is Benjamin Franklin, right? So prior to Benjamin Franklin, America really didn't have public libraries. There was like one or two libraries that was open to the common public, but most collections were owned by rich people and they just kind of loaned them out. Benjamin Franklin was kind of the beginning of change for that, because in 1731, Benjamin Franklin created a membership library. Basically, you think about it, a modern library, right? Modern day, you pay for libraries through taxes, and that's why you automatically get a library card for the library of, I believe it's your county. It might be city based, I can't remember. But the point is, you get your library card because it's paid for with taxes. Well, back in the day, obviously they didn't have libraries, so you didn't pay for libraries with taxes. So he kind of did that, but without the taxes. Instead, you would pay for a membership, a one-time payment, and then you would get a membership to this library that you could access and borrow books from whenever you wanted. Very much like the libraries of today. But of course, the difference being that it's, it is public to a certain extent, but if you couldn't afford it, then it was still an issue. Skip to a little while in the future, and you come across a man called Andrew Carnegie, who is a Scottish immigrant, came to America when he was 13. You might have heard of him before. I forgot that I had heard of him because it's been a while since I've taken an American history class. But if you don't recognize him right away, he's kind of known for being the steel guy, right? Carnegie Steel Company, very famous in kind of the Gilded Age era. Very, very, very wealthy man. But he wasn't always wealthy. He actually grew up very, very poor. And he was invited actually to go to a private library of a very wealthy man in the city that his family were living in, Pittsburgh. And he attributed a lot of his success to that. Of course, later down the road, he became very wealthy and decided to give back. And of course, Carnegie, being the wealthy man he is, decided not to give back in any small way, but in a rather large way. Because over his time of funding these libraries, they managed to build over 2,500 libraries around the world. Roughly 1795 is what I read, right? 1,795 libraries in the United States alone, and roughly 1,600 of those, a little over 1,600, were public libraries. And all he asked in return for funding the construction of these very nice libraries, trust me, I've lived in a lot of places where the public libraries aren't that great. These are really nice libraries, like on par with very famous libraries like the New York Public Library, or think the Library of Congress. Like, they're not huge buildings always, but they are very nice, very nicely constructed. They were meant to last. And all he asked in return was that their workers be paid and that the buildings would be maintained. Not a lot of ask in return, for building these massive libraries and completely funding them. I can't remember where I heard it, but at one point I even heard that over the span of building all these libraries, he ended up donating close to 95% of his total wealth just to building these libraries. Like, this guy was a true philanthropist giving back. And with that, we go back to the library I'm building. Because obviously, if you weren't aware, I'm not really building a city in America. It's not actually New York. It's just my interpretation of New York and America and creating this amalgamation of whatever I want it to be. But that being said, I want it to be based in somewhat of reality. So we're going off of real history here with Carnegie libraries and Benjamin Franklin and very famous libraries that we know from real life, and trying to use that as inspiration for what I'm doing. My main source of inspiration is obviously New York Public Library. I mean, look at it on Google, you'll see the inspiration, especially later on. But I did also take some inspiration from the Library of Congress, which is why it came up in my mind earlier, because I'd been looking at photos of it, and I looked a little at the Met, also in New York City, but I ended up not really taking any inspiration from that. It just didn't have the vibes that I wanted. It didn't come across to me as like library, which makes sense. It's not a library, it's a museum, which I think there are subtle differences between the two, although I will grant that this is probably the most museum I've ever seen a library look, you know? Architecturally, they do cross over quite a bit, but I think there are subtle differences. But yeah, you'll especially see later on, I have a large rotunda that I built in the center of the library, and the back is a mirror image of the front, which is not how the New York Public Library looks, which if you do look at it on Google Map and look at Bryant Park, which you can see I have a park in the back occasionally, that is meant to be my version of Bryant Park. You'll notice that the backs are very different. I don't really like the back of the New York Public Library. To me, it looks like unfinished and weird. So when I designed mine, I wanted to make it look more complete, like they actually designed the back as well as the front and didn't run out of budget, 3/4 of the way through the project and we're like, I'll just put something up there. Which, before I get too distracted in talking about the video itself, I do want to get back to my recommendation for today, right? Started it last episode. This episode I had a hard time because last episode I was like, it was in the moment. It was something basically that I had watched recently. But for this episode, I wanted to reach into some of a movie that I really love and a book that I really love. And the movie for today is This Beautiful Fantastic. Came out in 2016. It's a lovely movie, but if you don't like movies where you're going to cry, do not watch it because you will cry. But please do watch it because it's also amazing. Not to give too much away, but it's basically just about this woman who learns how to garden from her neighbor. Right, most basic plot line, that is it. Of course, it's a actually very beautiful film with a lot more to it and various things going on, and it is a little bit of a tearjerker, I will admit. I definitely cried every single time I've watched it. I was about to say the first time, but no, I've cried every time I watched it. It is a very emotional film, but it's a very beautiful film. I 100% recommend watching it, even if you know nothing about gardening. I don't either. I'm not a gardener. I'm terrible with plants. I own a bunch of fake plants because I like how they look, but I can't take care of them. I'm terrible at it. But the point is, even if you don't like gardening, you're going to like this film because it's so well done. And for the book today, The Girl Who Wrote in Silk by Kelly Estes. Kelly is Kelli, Estes, Estes. I'm spelling that because I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. So spelling it out so that you can actually look it up. Because again, I might be recommending these as just saying, you might not want to take these recommendations and say, oh, well, this is just something he likes. But in case you are looking for something to read or watch or whatever, here you go. I'm giving you some suggestions. I really like this book. It's also a bit heavy. It's emotional, yes, but it's also just very heavy. It talks about a lot of heavy topics. It's set in Seattle. It has a lot of history in it. It's a fun book, but it is heavy. And I'm going to leave it there, right? You want to know more? You're going to have to get a copy and read it yourself. But moving on to actually talk about what we're seeing. So this is like the rotunda I was telling you about, right? This does not exist in New York Public Library, but is more so inspired by the Library of Congress. Now, it's not exactly like the Library of Congress. I had to improvise because if you've ever seen a picture of the Library of Congress and the New York Public Library, you can very quickly tell that they are not the same building or the same architectural style. They might look similar, and they are in many ways, but they're not exactly the same. And it was actually incredibly hard because the rotunda that I built is very much so, to me, like, it's very Jeffersonian. It's very like, it gives off a Federalist architecture more so than classical or neoclassical, which is what the library itself is doing. And even in my build, it's that way. My explanation for that, my lore explanation, is that there was an old library here, right, built during that kind of library company Benjamin Franklin period, right, that was originally here. There was some kind of fire or whatever that burnt down some of the library, but not all of it, leaving the rotunda and some other sections there. When the city decided to rebuild, it was much later, after, when the fire happened, more during the Carnegie period. Would Carnegie have funded this library? Probably not, because there was already a library here. This city is pretty large. They could have afforded it. They wouldn't have needed the grant. That, and it would have been better for his funding to go to libraries that would have serviced smaller communities that really couldn't afford to have a library. Whereas New York City, a city the size of New York, this isn't New York City, but the city of the size of Newport or New York could very easily support themselves and get their own library. But the point is, they would have built on the library at that point, and they would have left the rotunda there as a piece of history, and then built this new library around it. Now, you'll see in the back, right? I said the back is going to mirror the front. There is a large, horizontal? Yeah, like a large lengthwise courtyard. Whereas you see this courtyard I'm building now is like 1/4 of the building. There's going to be one long, courtyard in the back. And then when you see it from above, it very much looks like the back was added later. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to say that the original library ended where the rotunda is and where that T-junction of the roofs is, and that would have been the back of the building. And then sometime even later, probably the 1910s or so, they decided to expand the library using the original style, and they just mirrored basically the front onto the back, adding another wing around and creating a new courtyard space. I also want to take the time to thank everyone who's subscribed. I mean, it's more than I ever thought I would get to, not gonna lie. It's more than, I started this for fun, right? If that wasn't clear by my YouTube channel itself and everything else that's happening. My intention when I started doing this series was I was going to be rebuilding the city anyway, so I figured this is a good point to start making videos. So I did, right? And it's just for fun. Regardless of whether people watch this or not, I was going to continue doing it. Although I do love the feedback, keep it coming. If you have any suggestions for video or things that you would like to see more of, or hey, I would like to see you build this or that, I can see about including it. No promises, obviously, but that's something I can definitely work with and try to I don't know what's the word, accommodate, I guess, or go with the suggestions and work with them. But for the most part, this was meant always to just be for me, for fun, no repercussions or anything like that. But as of recording, I have 54 subscribers now. I was going to do a 50 subscriber special when I first saw that I hit 50, but unfortunately I don't have the time. It is getting onto crunch period, right? We're in April, we're almost at May, finals is coming up. I've got a lot of projects and a lot of extra stuff at home because it's spring, so it's it's mowing season again. Yay, get to do that. I hate mowing, by the way. My least favorite chore. It's the worst thing ever. And weed whacking. Ugh, weed whacking is the worst. I hate it. But you gotta get those edges trimmed and whatnot. But the point being, this is like probably one of the busiest times of the year for me is spring, typically at least. So who knows if that's going to happen. If it does, it's not going to be taking place of one of these videos. I don't want it to. So it's not going to be like episode 13 50 subscriber special. It would just be like a fun thing. I don't even know what I would do for it, honestly. I guess if you have a suggestion for something you'd like to see, go right ahead. Maybe I'll do a tutorial for how to build something. I don't know. We'll see. You know, I guess that's for us all to find out. If that happens, what it will be. As you can see, I'm doing like half of the build right now, right? And then I'm going to copy and paste this left side that you see here to the right. You can also kind of see that courtyard I was mentioning and how this kind of wing comes off the back here and how it very much feels like a separate thing. You'll also notice that it looks very thin right now, the back wing. Like it looks so thin that it looks very pointless. I agree. I fixed that. Can't remember if I fixed it in the time lapse or if I just fixed it after, but it does get fixed. I thickened it up a little bit because it kind of makes no sense, because how would you fit books in that really thin space if you see like that band going across there in the back? Not a lot of space for actual like books. You can see here now here in a second. Yeah, now I'm starting to prep, getting ready to copy it over, and then we'll copy it over. Sorry. And there again, you can see that courtyard I was talking about and that kind of back extension of what would have been added. I think it's very clear from that point of view. And this is finishing off the front a little bit. Not everything that you're going to see in like the ending like walkthrough bits. I don't know what to call it because it's not a time lapse, but I'm not going to be doing live play. It's just like flying through it. I guess a fly through or kind of person tour. I don't know how to describe it, but the point is you'll see in that there's like things added, like the lions and trees and things like that that aren't that aren't in this space right now. I also worked on the park in the back quite extensively, and this is not technically the last build I did in this episode, but is the last build I'm showing, just because the actual last build, I did a time lapse of it, and you might be looking at the time that you have left of this episode and be wondering, why didn't I include that? It's mainly just because it's a little bit repetitive. I didn't have a lot of time this week to work. My dog got a little bit sick, so I had to watch her, and that kind of took up some of my time, as you might understand, along with everything else. So it was a bit hectic trying to get this finished, and you know, I had a vision of what I wanted to do, and so I just felt like it didn't even really fit into this episode. Technically, this build doesn't either, but I like it, and it's at least a little bit unique and kind of special. It's very like postmodern architecture, so it's at least something a little bit different from what you see typically of what I build, which is typically more classical structures. That's honestly where I'm good at. I will fully admit that when it comes to modern and postmodern buildings, I'm actually not that good. I don't think I'm very good at the design work. At least I'm not nearly as strong at it as I am with more classical buildings. I genuinely think that I'm very proud of my classical buildings. I don't think I'm the best, by far, no. But I at least understand classical architecture enough to be able to recreate it decently well. Gothic architecture, I'm not very good at. It's something that I'm getting better at and I'm learning, but it is incredibly hard. If you know anyone who's good at Gothic architecture, think B-dubs. I don't even know how. Like, he thinks of these things and it just blows my mind away. And because I don't know, Gothic just doesn't make any sense to me for whatever reason. I can't wrap my head around it very well. But classical architecture, 100%, I understand it. I get it. I get its motivations. I get where it's coming from. I've studied it a lot, you know, and with classical architecture, a lot of it's based off of, you know, ratios and reference to classical structures. Who would have guessed? And so it's easier for my mind to wrap my mind around it. Whereas like Gothic and especially postmodern is something that I just don't get. So I base it off of real life. This is based off of a building actually near the New York Public Library in Bryant Park. You might see it. It's not exactly there, but it's good enough. I do like this build, and I like how ugly it is. I'm sorry. It is ugly, okay? I knew it was ugly as I was building it. It's meant to be ugly. Again, it's one of those it's meant to be ugly buildings, which if you want to build a realistic city, you gotta include. There has to be ugly buildings because not every building is going to be amazing, spectacular, and beautiful, or the exact architectural style that you yourself want. That's just not how cities work, right? They're built over time, and some time periods had better architecture than others, like everything before the World Wars, basically. I'm not a huge fan of modern architecture personally, which is probably another reason why I'm not good at building it. I do think that probably has a pretty big factor, right? I love classical architecture. I love Victorian architecture, and that's probably why I vibe with it and I understand it and am able to recreate it significantly better than I am postmodern and modern, because I just don't understand modernism, because I don't like it. It doesn't please me at all. And here you can see the park that I was talking about and all the work I did with the trees and the paths and things like that. And in a sec, we'll fly in front of the building and you'll see the trees there as well. But yeah, I think it really came together, especially like all of the park area here with the bushes and everything really helped to make this space and to cement the library into where it was. Now, obviously, I talked about placemaking and the reason why you want something to be a plaza versus a park multiple times. And the reason why this is like very much a lawn is because not only is it more of like a formal park, but it's also a place where I imagine people would want to lay down. Like in real life, Bryant Park is mostly a lawn space where you can have different events that could need a large lawn space, and just letting people read a book, you know, lie down, read a book, sunbathe, that kind of a thing. Yeah, and you can see the courtyards and that rotunda there all come together. And I lined up those two side parts with the road that's there. So if you're ever on that road looking towards the building, it has that archway above, and you can see the rotunda in the distance. And there you can see those lions. I love them. The front is very nice, and this is of course facing right onto the park. The park is going to be on the left eventually. So with that, that's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I say that every episode, but I really do mean it. I really do hope you enjoyed this episode. A lot of behind the scenes work went into this one. Like I said, I had to do a lot of research for it and trying to figure out exactly what I wanted this build to look like that we're focusing on today and what I wanted this video to be like. Ultimately, if you want to see more, think about subscribing. If you like this video, think about liking. And there you go. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.